Tonight, a special edition of World News Tonight from Paris. The international manhunt right now, the race to catch the suspected 8th attacker. The explosions heard as teams converge on this neighborhood. Terry Moran is there. An act of war tonight, hundreds of raids and arrests across France and Belgium. The president of France declaring we're at war with ISIS, sending an aircraft carrier. Just as new images emerge from inside the concert hall before the attack and then after. The threat to America, the new ISIS video tonight, praising the attacks here in Paris and now threatening a major American city. The head of the CIA saying Paris should be a wake-up call. Pierre Thomas tonight with the video. And coming to America or not. The refugee backlash now in the U.S. Did one of the Paris attackers slip through posing as a refugee with a passport? Now the list of governors back home in the U.S. saying refugees should not be allowed in America.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Paris.
Good evening tonight from Paris, where this country has declared war against ISIS. This evening, the airstrikes, the aircraft carrier soon on the move, and a dramatic scene playing out as authorities thought they were zeroing in on that suspected 8th attacker. It's believed he played a central role in the attacks, armed and dangerous, authorities warning the public not to intervene. His brother believed to be one of the suicide bombers. SWAT teams today converging on a neighborhood in Brussels, surrounding a town some authorities have said has virtually been turned over to the Islamic State. Also, a major development involving the threat to America. A new ISIS video praising the Paris attacks and promising an attack on Washington, D.C. is coming. Our team analyzing that video for you tonight. But first, ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran in Belgium, as he heard what sounded like explosions, with investigators racing to catch the suspected attacker still on the run.
Police moved in swiftly, cordoning off streets, surrounding an apartment building, scaling rooftops. They warned neighbors to stay inside, away from windows. Then, they moved in. But their target was gone, and tonight the manhunt continues for the gunman who got away. 26-year-old Salah Abdeslam, suspected of being one of the shooters that hit cafes and restaurants in Paris. Police say he fled Paris Friday night. They found the cars he'd rented, one left outside the theater, the other abandoned in this suburb. Then, driving a third car with 2 other passengers, he headed toward Belgium, stopped by police at a roadblock on Saturday morning, but not detained, and they made it across the border. The 2 other people in that getaway car picked up by police later, now charged with participation in terrorism. And the fugitive's brother, also detained but later released, saying today he had no idea that both his brothers, one died during the attacks, were terrorists. They were normal brothers, he said. Normal. This gritty neighborhood, Molenbeek, a breeding ground of terrorism. While we were on the streets here tonight, we spoke to one man, he didn't want his face shown, who told us many of the young here are radical.
3 of your neighbors went to Syria. What? Yeah.
Today, a French police union is even saying that ISIS has taken over here and that the Belgian government has lost control of this neighborhood. David?
Terry Moran in Belgium tonight. Terry, thank you. We're going to turn now to the fast-moving investigation underway right here in Paris. French President Hollande today saying France is at war, vowing to destroy ISIS. Hollande wants the state of emergency in France extended for months now. French warplanes conducting airstrikes on ISIS targets and an aircraft carrier on the move next. Tonight, what they're planning as new video now emerges of the attacks here, the joy just before it all turned dark. For the first time, the moments before Paris was forever changed. These photographs now emerging from inside that concert hall, taken from the stage before the attack. So many smiling faces, their hands in the air. And now we know what would come next, the gunfire breaking through the music. We're also getting our first look at this video of the immediate aftermath. Sirens blaring, voices crying out. 2 officers peering through those doors. President Obama saying today the U.S. had no intelligence this attack was coming.
There were no specific mentions of this particular attack that would give us a sense of something that we need, that we could provide French authorities, for example, or act on ourselves.
While here in France, President Hollande stood side by side with students in a moment of silence across the country. A short time later, in front of a joint session of parliament, he declared France is at war with ISIS, calling for an extension. He now wants a 3-month state of emergency here in France, saying today the attacks were, quote, planned in Syria, organized in Belgium, and perpetrated in France. Tonight, this country continuing its military response, from those airstrikes overnight thanking America for providing assistance to sending a warship, an aircraft carrier, to the eastern Mediterranean on Thursday, right off the coast of Syria. The world now watching as that international manhunt plays out, the alleged 8th attacker on the front pages of newspapers across the globe. A massive anti-terror crackdown across France. These images of officers entering a building, detaining a man in Toulouse. 168 police raids in all, 23 arrested, computers, hard drives seized, 31 weapons found, among them Kalashnikovs, bulletproof vests, even a rocket launcher. 104 people tonight under house arrest here in France. As you travel through Paris, all of the places where the carnage unfolded. And today we learned there were 19 different nationalities among the dead. A survivor today holding his blood-stained ticket from the concert. Marisha Payne showing photos she took on her cell phone inside the concert hall with friends standing this close to the band. She hid in the dark inside a closet for 3 hours.
All we could hear at that point was a stampede, people running and screaming, gunfire and thuds, which could only have been people hitting the floor, their bodies hitting the floor.
And we met Roman Renewal, who lived near 2 of the restaurants targeted. He told me it was his responsibility to be there with the victims who were dying. Why did you kneel down beside them?
What could I do? Ignore them? I'd just say, do what you can. You're not a doctor. You can't help. You can just show feelings to people. Don't let people die alone. So you do what you can do. You just watch. You just try to ease pain. But what can you do?
Sensing it was his responsibility. Meantime, tonight, the French Prime Minister now saying he doesn't want to scare the French people, but he does want to warn them, saying he believes more attacks are coming, wanting to make sure everyone is aware, he said. And British Prime Minister David Cameron saying they have foiled 7 terror attacks in the UK in just the last 6 months alone. As they hunt now for that alleged 8th attacker considered very dangerous, another major reveal tonight, the so-called mastermind behind this whole attack. Authorities say he was behind the highly coordinated attacks across this city. Tonight, the leading theory, where and how the mastermind assembled that team of attackers and delivered the deadly orders. And we have new information on the passport discovered as authorities grow more certain that one of the attackers used it to pose as a refugee and slip into Europe. ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross on what we're learning now about the alleged mastermind.
He is only 27. But he's risen rapidly through the ranks of ISIS to mastermind some of their biggest terror plots in Europe. In this propaganda video, Abdelhamid Abaoud asks, is there anything better than jihadism, than martyrdom? Officials believe he planned the Paris attacks from ISIS headquarters in Syria, carrying out the direct orders of top ISIS leaders, who have set up a new unit to launch terror attacks in the West, with recruits separated into brigades by their nationality and language skills.
This was planning a complicated operation, infiltrating trained personnel to do it, and pulling it off across borders.
The ISIS mastermind sent one of its attackers from Syria, posing as a refugee, presenting this forged passport to Greek officials just 5 weeks ago, and then making his way across Europe to Paris. Other attackers were handpicked in the mastermind's hometown in that Brussels neighborhood of Molenbeek, where he traveled often, narrowly escaping a police raid just this past January, before he returned to Syria, where he is believed to be tonight.
The mastermind selects and trains and motivates the suicide bombers, but he never kills himself.
And Brian, French authorities say they had no advance warning of these attacks, but you're learning tonight several of those killers were on the radar of French authorities?
That's right, David. At least 2 of the young men were well known to French intelligence as possible ISIS recruits. One of them had actually been charged with terror-connected crimes, but allowed to remain free. And the government, David, clearly lost track of both of them. David.
Brian Ross with us again tonight. Brian, thank you. Tonight, the nation's top security experts studying the new threat from ISIS, the 12-minute video praising the attacks here in Paris and now vowing to strike Washington, D.C. next. America's top spy, CIA Chief John Brennan, warning ISIS very likely has other terror operations in the pipeline. And the New York City police chief revealing what concerns him most, those matching suicide belts worn by the attackers. Tonight, across the nation's capital, images of beefed up security and what we're now learning about how the attackers may have gone undetected. Did a video game help them go dark? ABC senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas analyzing the new threat to the homeland.
French police in a shootout exchanging gunfire with terrorists outside the Bataclan concert hall. 3 hours of terror, ISIS quickly claiming credit for it all, saying Paris is only the beginning. And in this video, ISIS issues a warning to America. An attack on the nation's capital is coming. As we struck in France in the center of its abode in Paris, then we swear that we will strike America at its center in Washington.
We are always at a heightened level of security because of our locale.
The CIA director says the attacks in France should serve as a wake-up call for Americans.
Their agenda is to kill, pure and simple.
Across the country, security is being ramped up. There's a heavy police presence in Times Square. And the New York City Police Commissioner said today that ISIS tactics in the Paris attack deeply concern him.
The idea that all of them were equipped with these suicide vests.
U.S. officials are also worried that the killers in France may have used encryption technology to hide their computer and cell phone communications, so-called going dark. And new tonight, Belgian officials suspect the killers in France also use gaming systems like PlayStation to communicate off-grid. Even though there's no specific credible ISIS threat to the homeland, the FBI is intensifying surveillance of their suspected sympathizers in all 50 states. More than 70 prospective supporters of ISIS arrested in the last 2 years alone, some with deadly intentions. Security stepped up across this city, and there are more than 900 terror investigations across the country as we speak. David?
Pierre Thomas with us tonight. Pierre, thank you. And tonight, France dramatically intensifying its airstrikes against ISIS. Retaliation, of course, for the deadly attacks here. Bombing targets in Syria, the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa. But tonight, many are now asking, why weren't those targets being hit far sooner? ABC's chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz now.
The response from the French Air Force has been strong and swift. French fighter jets pounding targets in the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa, bombing an ISIS command post, training camp, recruiting center. But this is not a real increase in bombing. These are ISIS targets that may have already been on a list or strike package for weeks. So why not strike when they were first on the list?
They would wait for them to be populated, to have a class there in training, to have a group there being recruited.
But when Paris was attacked, the U.S. stepped aside and let the French go after the targets as retaliatory strikes. It's not known whether there were ISIS fighters inside. As for the overall military strategy, nothing is changing. The president adamant about not adding combat ground troops.
We have the right strategy, and we're going to see it through.
ISIS is believed to have between 20 to 30,000 fighters and oil fields that generate about $40 million per month.
And Martha's with us now live. Martha, the U.S. aircraft are now attacking new targets?
Well, for the first time, the U.S. targeted ISIS fuel trucks, David, more than 100 of them used to smuggle oil to finance military and terrorist operations. But those, too, have been on the target list for a while as well. David?
Martha Raddatz with us again tonight. Martha, thank you. We're going to turn now to that moment on the football field and concern over Muslim backlash in America. NFL teams paying tribute to victims in Paris on Sunday. The moment of silence before the Lions-Packers game ruined by a fan shouting an anti-Muslim remark. Star quarterback Aaron Rodgers upset by the comment, speaking out after the game.
It's that kind of prejudicial ideology that I think puts us in the position that we're in today.
Rodgers saying he was disappointed with the fan, calling the comment, quote, very inappropriate. Next tonight here, the growing backlash across America amid troubling questions. Did one of the alleged attackers here in Paris slip into Europe posing as a refugee? It's fueling a fiery debate back home. Governors in each of the following states tonight saying that Syrian refugees are not welcome. ABC's chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl.
President Obama today declared America has a moral responsibility to allow some Syrian refugees to settle here in the United States.
Many of these refugees are the victims of terrorism themselves. Slamming the door in their faces would be a betrayal of our values.
But tonight, Republican presidential candidates are attacking the president's plan to allow up to 10,000 Syrian refugees into the U.S.
President Obama and Hillary Clinton's proposal to bring to America tens of thousands of Syrian Muslims is nothing short of lunacy.
The president's plan says nothing about the religion of the refugees, but Senator Cruz says, quote, there is no meaningful risk of Christians committing acts of terror. He and Jeb Bush insist the emphasis should be on allowing Syrian Christians into the U.S.
They're being beheaded, they're being executed by both sides, and I think we have a responsibility to help.
The president called that un-American.
When I hear political leaders suggesting that there would be a religious test for which person who's fleeing from a war-torn country is admitted, that's shameful. That's not American. It's not who we are.
President Obama also said that any Syrian refugees coming into the United States will be thoroughly vetted to ensure that no terrorists slip in. Republicans just aren't buying that, David. In fact, some Republicans are saying it's just not possible.
Severe storm warnings tonight in Diane, California. The EF1 tornado tearing roofs off homes. And look at the blast of winter in Utah. Heavy snow causing treacherous driving near Salt Lake City. There are tornado watches tonight from the Texas Panhandle to Nebraska. 14 million in the storm zone as the threat shifts east tomorrow. And in Denver, a blizzard warning in effect. Up to a foot of snow is expected. News tonight about gas prices with Thanksgiving coming. The average cost of gas dropping 6 cents a gallon to $2.18. That's 72 cents lower than this time last year. And Prince William tonight sending a message, announcing he will be in the crowd at London's Wembley Stadium tomorrow, attending the soccer match between England and France. The royal family tonight calling it a show of solidarity with the people of France. Finally tonight here, the Eiffel Tower has now been lit up to remember the victims here in Paris. And paying tribute right there at the Eiffel Tower tonight were so many Americans wanting them to know we care. On our way to the Eiffel Tower, driving through Paris, we noticed the famed Ferris wheel, the Rue de Paris, lit in the blue, white, and red of the French flag. As we get closer to the tower, a reminder of how tense this city is, the officers on patrol. But when we arrived, the tower lit up in the colors of this country, and right in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, the Americans paying tribute. Michelle Celine just moved her family here 2 months ago from California. She, of course, remembers 9/11 in the U.S. and now the terror attacks here.
Back then, we were on our way to work. Over here, we're on our way to sleep. And 2 days that just completely turns you inside out. We have to continue on with life. We can't hide. We can't stop our lives.
And Andy and Julia Hawthorne from Austin, Texas. They were here to celebrate her 40th birthday. They were at the top of the Eiffel Tower Friday night when they learned of the terror attacks.
We were at the top when we heard about it.
The top of the tower.
Top of the tower, yeah. And the news, all our family members began to send us text messages. Are you safe? Are you safe? And we didn't know why.
Tonight, as they prepare to go back home to Texas, they wanted to return to the Eiffel Tower lit up. It was a beautiful sight there tonight, and thank you for watching here on a Monday evening. I'm David Muir. I hope to see you right back here tomorrow. From all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Every day, more Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source. ABC News, honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for overall excellence in television and radio. ABC News, America's #1 news source.